On today's episode, we will be discussing, is something wrong with Austin Reaves? And are Laker fans getting frustrated with Luka? Here we go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Matter of Stats podcast. I'm your host, Anthony, with you as always. And if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button below. It helps us grow our channel, and we really appreciate it. All right, well, let's jump right in this week. So the Lakers' roller coaster of a season continues. When we last spoke, they were struggling a bit, right? They lost a few in a row. Then they won a few in a row, albeit against bad teams. Then they had a nice sort of litmus test this week at Denver against a Nuggets team that was down three key players. The Lakers were relatively healthy in that game. They did have DeAndre Ayton go out very early in that game with a knee injury. However, the Lakers trailed from start to finish. They never led in that game. They did cut it to 1 point late in the fourth quarter, but a couple of missed open shots by Marcus Smart and then a couple of buckets by the Joker, and that's all she wrote. And the Lakers were not up to the task and, in my opinion, failed that sort of litmus test to see where they were at in comparison to a good, not great at that moment, Denver team that is right above them in the standings versus how they compare, obviously, to other elite teams in the West. That's been the Lakers' MO all year, as they've been able to, for the most part, handle business against the teams that they are better than, but have struggled most of the time, losing more often than not to teams that are clearly better than them. In fact, with that loss in Denver on Thursday night, the Lakers are now 4-12 against the elite teams in the NBA, which means teams with a 60% winning percentage, right? So they're basically above 600, so a little better than a 500 team. The top teams in the NBA, the Lakers just can't beat them. And that's pretty much what we've been talking about all year is this Lakers team is good, not great. They are competitive, but not a championship contender. And it all starts with the roster, right? We know the roster's flawed. We know this is going to be a big summer, etc. So we can, talk about that till we're blue in the face, but it's not going to help us today. It's not going to help us tomorrow. It's not going to help them against the upcoming schedule this week, which gets tougher. They were able to take care of a poor Pacers team without LeBron and Ayton, but that's a game they're supposed to win, and they did, right? They feed on the bottom feeders. They struggle against the top. Luka and Reaves were able to handle the Pacers. Luka was great. I think he had 44 points in that game. Luka actually leads the NBA in 40-point games, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But they do have a tough schedule upcoming with the Knicks and the Nuggets. And the whole month of March, they've got some tough games. They've got the Rockets a couple of times, so they do have also the T-Wolves coming up next week. So these are big games for the Lakers if they want to actually jump in the standings, because despite everything, despite the flaws, despite the lack of athleticism, poor defense, etc., they are still right there. They're 6 in the West right now. They're 2 games ahead of Phoenix to stay out of that dreaded play-in. But they're there. They're only a half game behind Denver. Technically, they're tied in the loss column, and they're, just a game or two behind the Rockets and Minnesota to jump all the way to 3rd, potentially in the West. And they've got opportunities. Like I said, they've got Minnesota this week. They've got Denver coming up again, and they've got a couple games against the Rockets later this month. So the opportunities are there if the Lakers can somehow prove that they can find a way to beat teams that are better than them, which has been their Achilles heel all season long. But jumping into this week's topics, wanted to talk specifically first about Austin Reaves. Now, we know Austin Reaves has had a very good season. He's been really consistent most of the year. He suffered the injury, missed some time. He's since come back, obviously played, now several games, but recently he has been struggling. The offense isn't quite there. The consistency isn't quite there. And in particular, you can see it on the court that he doesn't seem to be playing quite like himself. And there could be a lot of reasons to it. Maybe still little nagging effects from that injury. Also could be trying to, reacclimate himself and his role into the system and the process of what the Lakers were doing without him, and now fitting back in with LeBron, Luka, and himself. There could be some struggles there, and there could be changes in the rotations, right? There could be changes in what JJ's doing. Maybe now it's a little different in the way he's being used as far as what rotations he's out there with, what the coaching staff is asking him to do, right? Maybe play a little more off ball at times and then play on ball when he's out there without Luka or just LeBron or etc. Right? So there's been a lot more mixing and matching lately from the coaching staff. You see LeBron out there by himself at times. You see Luka out there by himself at times. You see LeBron and Reaves out there. You see Luka and Reaves out there. So there's been a lot of mix and matching of the big three, if you will, with various rotations to kind of see what works. And JJ said it even a couple weeks ago that this Laker unit is still a work in progress, which on one hand is kind of true, but on the other hand, it's a little scary to think that we are there's only 18, 19 games left in the regular season, and the head coach is still saying that we're a work in progress. I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about the ability of this Laker team and maybe where they're headed, and more importantly, maybe what their ceiling is. But Reaves in particular, so over his last 10 games, you can clearly see the struggles. So just to give you a frame of reference. So on the season, Reaves is averaging a very nice almost 24 points a game and shooting almost 50% from the field. Over the last 10 games, you've really seen the dip, and it's noticeable in his numbers. He's averaging just over 17 points a game, and he's shooting just under 45% from the field. So those are significant drops in the production that you were getting from him earlier in the year over these last 10 games. And like I said, it could be due to a number of reasons. Maybe he's still not quite 100%, but I think it's still a little more, to me, from what I've seen, it looks more eye test, like he's still kind of trying to figure things out, playing with LeBron and Luka again, and that role of what they want him to do when he's out there with particular units. Be a little more aggressive, be a little more less aggressive, right? So it's hard to take your foot on and off the gas pedal at times, especially when you are a player like Austin Reaves. And this is part of the problem with the Lakers roster construction is you got three guys that are all at their best when the pedal's to the metal and the ball's in their hands and they're attacking and creating. So anytime you're asking any one of the three to not do that, I think you're asking them to take something away from their game that makes them great, that is the strength of their ability, and it's going to create a downfall. And I think you're seeing it with Austin Reaves. 17 points a game is just not what we've come to expect from him. And quite honestly, it's not what we need. The Lakers need all three of those guys to be firing at all cylinders for this team to be successful. And it starts with Luka. And you can argue all day if it's Luka, LeBron, Reaves, Luka, Reaves, LeBron, like who's most important, who eats first, etc. But the bottom line is, for the Lakers to be successful, this roster is not good enough unless all three of them are really playing at a high level and probably giving you 60 plus a night. And right now, Reaves simply is struggling, and it could be just figuring things out. It could be a little nagging injury. But it certainly begs the question, what's wrong with him, because the numbers aren't there. And hopefully he will figure it out sooner than later, because the Lakers absolutely need him to be the 25-point a game, 50% shooter, and not the 17-point, 44% shooter if they're going to have any hopes of getting out of the first round in the playoffs, assuming, they even make it, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens this week. Like I said, there's big games coming up, opportunity for Reaves to play better, and the Lakers will need him to play better if they're going to win some of these games. So we'll find out real quick here. Wanted to talk about one other thing this week, and that's Luka. There's always going to be a lot of chatter with Luka, of course, and the Lakers. But particularly this week, there's been a lot of chatter about the refs, the complaining, the struggling shooting from time to time, right? You've seen a lot of this on social media and all the big shows, right? Is Luka hurting the Lakers? Is he helping the Lakers with his complaining and how it leads to the lack of defense and all of these different avenues? So it also begs the question, are some Laker fans getting frustrated a little bit with the either lack of production or the complaining and how that is a domino effect, the trickle down effect to the rest of the team, right? If you're complaining, maybe you're not hustling. If you're complaining, you're not getting back on defense, right? If you're complaining, maybe that's affecting your offense, right? Because your mind isn't in the right place. You're thinking, I'm going to get fouled on this play and they're not going to call it. And then you miss the shot. So there's a lot of factors there. And it begs the question. Now, for the record, my issues with Luka are totally different. Like, I have no issue with everything I see from Luka for a couple reasons. One, I think this is what I expected, and it's what you should expect from a player like Luka. And there are a lot of players like this. You know, the Joker doesn't really play defense. You know, Steph Curry doesn't really play defense. Now, you can argue the levels of they complain more or less or whatever, right? But there are lots of stars in the NBA that don't defend. And you can win with a star that doesn't defend if you put the right pieces around them. Now, we know the Lakers don't clearly have all those right pieces in place right now. Hopefully they will. That's the goal of the summer. But that's later on. That's a different topic. For now, the short term, Luka's going to do what he always does and what he needs to do. My biggest concern with Luka isn't necessarily the complaining. And I know even like the technical fouls, right? He got his 15th or 16th the other night. So one more, he gets suspended. That part, the complaining doesn't bother me as much. And I think part of the reason the complaining at least feels like it's at an all-time high for Luka, more so than we've seen in Dallas, maybe even more so than we've seen from LeBron, who also has a reputation of, getting a bit to the refs. I think part of the reason why it might feel like it's at an all-time high or a level that is beyond acceptable is I think Luka feels like if he doesn't score 30 plus a night, they can't win. And some of that is true. If he doesn't score 30, 40 points, they don't win. He had 44 against the Pacers. Without LeBron, that's part of a factor. And they won comfortably, but the Pacers were kind of hanging around for a little bit. So if he doesn't score 35, 40 points, do they not win that game? When they beat the Pelicans pushed them relatively till the end. If he doesn't score 25, 27, 30, I don't know if the Lakers win, right? The other night in Denver, he didn't have a great game. He didn't score 30, 35, and the Lakers fell short, right? They didn't get 20 from LeBron and 20 from Reaves. So he didn't score 30, they lost. If he scores 34 in that game, they probably win. I think at times Luka might feel like if I don't score 30, 35 a night, we're not going to win. And he might be right. If he doesn't score a lot of points, this Laker team can and does struggle, especially against the good teams. So I think part of the complaining, in my opinion, is really led to the fact that he may feel like he has to do so much for this team, and he's got to either score or get fouled on every play, or he might feel like they're out of it. They're not going to score on that possession. They're going to go down, give up a bucket. Now that's a -4 points or a -5 points, right? So to me, I think that could be a big factor. So I think in the long term, if the front office is able to build this roster the way they are hoping and claiming they will do in the summer to support Luka and give the tools you need for athleticism, defense, and shooting around a guy like Luka, hopefully, I think that will drop off as we move forward. If he doesn't feel like he has to do as much for this team to be successful. I also think, for me, I'd like to see Luka dunk the ball a little bit more. I know he's never been a dunker, but I think some of those opportunities where he drives to the basket and he misses the layup because he does get a little contact and he's upset that he didn't get the foul. If he dunks that, it doesn't matter. He makes the bucket, and maybe he does get the call because the physicality and the nature of the dunk might lead to a tiny bit more contact than it does on a layup. And he gets the bucket and he gets the call. And then there's no reason to complain. So I think that also is a tiny little adjustment that he can make from time to time. I'm not saying go in like LeBron and try to throw it down on people. I'm just saying when you have those easy, uncontested, quick step moves to the basket where he likes to kiss it up or get the bump and try to kiss it up, dunk it. Doesn't have to be crazy. Just dunk it, get the easy bucket, and you probably get the call on some of those 50-50s because now that marginal contact looks a little less marginal on a physical dunk than it does on a nice, easy layup. So those are my only immediate concerns with Luka. I think some of these will work itself out, but yeah. Does he complain a lot? Of course, yes. Would I like to see him complain a little less? Yes. But I think it's all due to the domino effects of this team and the way they play and what they're capable of and the way this roster is constructed. So I think long-term, it'll work itself out. But Luka, if you're listening, just dunk the ball a couple more times. That's all I'm asking. I think that'll solve a few of these problems. And if Reeves gets it going again, then that'll help a little bit. Maybe Luka won't have to score 35 a night for the Lakers to have a chance to win if Reeves gets back to his 25 plus, and then LeBron is just gravy on top. So we'll see. We'll see what this week brings for the Lakers. Like I said, it's a tough schedule of games, but an opportunity to beat some good teams and gain in the standings, or they could drop and now they find themselves in the play-in. So it's a big week for the Lakers. Let's see if they can take advantage of these opportunities. And as always, we'll be back to discuss it next week. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Matter of Stats Podcast.